Welcome everyone. I'm David Chapman. I'm one of the presenters tonight. And of course, this is Women of the Shore, who have come all the way in from the South Shore to be here today.
Birds of fire, we are the stars which sing. We sing with our light. We are the birds of fire. We fly over the sky. Our light is a voice. We make a road for the spirits to pass over. Among us are 3 hunters who chase a bear. There never was a time when they were not hunting. We look down on the mountains. This is the song of the stars.
So I'm going to ask if anybody in the audience recognizes those stars in the picture. Anyone have a guess? The Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, correct? Now, here's the trick question. What's your name? I'm sorry. Lillian. So Lillian, do you think those are constellations? You know the answer to this, don't you? What are they? Yes, these are the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, but they're not constellations. They are inside with other stars. They make constellations which have names like Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Big Bear and the Little Bear. But people see these kinds of patterns and they give them special names, like the Big Dipper. But not everyone calls that the Big Dipper. Is there anyone here from the British Isles? Anyone know what they might call that in the British Isles? Anyone? The plow. Did you see that? Could you see the Big Dipper being a plow? To plow the earth. Here's the handle and here's the blade of the plow. So some people see it as a plow. Other people see it as a chariot being drawn by horses. So lots of people in different cultures around the world look at the same stars and they see different patterns and have different stories. And that's the theme of tonight's presentation. The International Astronomical Union, which are people from all over the world, got together and decided, okay, these stars are going to be in these constellations and we're going to make it official. And so that's like the United Nations of Astronomers. Now these are the same people that voted Pluto out of the Planet Club. So just so you know who we're talking about. But the interesting thing is, even though they divided the sky up into these constellations, they didn't say how you should connect the dots and draw pictures with them. They didn't go there. They just said, these stars belong to these constellations, you can draw your own pictures. You don't care. So really, constellations are just patterns of stars. The typical ones we see in the star charts, they came to us from the Greeks and the Romans. And the Arabs had something to do with that as well. Arabs named a lot of stars. But those standard constellations like Orion and Ursa Major and those are from the Greeks and the Romans, and that's what we have in our Western culture. But different cultures saw different patterns. The Chinese, the Hindu, and the North American natives saw different patterns, but not always that different. So all of these patterns have different myths and legends associated with them, and they vary from nation to nation. Even within North America, between Aboriginal nations, the stories vary and change according to where you are in North America and what story is being told. And they're seasonal. Some constellations you can see only in the summer, some you can see in the winter. And they also use them for time telling and also to find their way around, navigation. So I just wanted to give you a little language lesson. You thought you were coming here to learn about astronomy, but I'm going to tell you about language too. Constellation, the word constellation comes from two Latin words. Con means together, and stella means star. So constellation just means stars coming together. It's just a collection of stars. You can find the Big Dipper, and that you find the bowl of the Dipper and the handle of the Dipper. These two stars at the end of the pole, the Dipper's upside down now, pouring out its water or whatever. If you follow the stars of the end of the bowl, they're called the pointers, and if you follow them, you find a star called Polaris, which is very close to the North Pole of the sky. People call it the North Star. Now, it's not a particularly bright star. Some people seem to have the idea that Polaris, the North Star, is the brightest star in the sky, but it's not. But it's a fairly bright star in that part of the sky, but it's not the brightest one ever. So this is how, if you can find Polaris in the sky, and then you go down to the horizon, that way is north. And once you know where north is, then you know where east is, and you know where south is, and you know where west is, and you can find your way. So that's how we use the stars to navigate. In the southern hemisphere, they can't see the Big Dipper and Polaris. And moreover, they don't have a particular star near the pole. So it's a little bit trickier when you're in the southern hemisphere. Now, there's another constellation that's quite close to Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and it's called Bootes. And depending on who you talk to, he's either a great hunter or he's a herdsman. A little bit of a difference there, but it's a figure of a man. So there's a man here, and he's got some legs and a body and a head. And over here in this drawing here, he has, let's look at this one, it's easier to see this one. Here, he's drawn as a hunter. He's got a big club. He's going to hit somebody on the head with that club, or an animal or something. This one over here is Bootes. You see what he's got? He doesn't look really so massive. And up in one hand, he's got this little sickle, which is used for harvesting grain. And in this hand, he's got something. He's got this little wand, this little staff, and it's got this little hook at the end. Does anyone know what that is? A shepherd's crook. And what's that used for? You grab sheep around the neck with it and pull them along and tell them, show them where they want them to go. It's also used for removing terrible speakers from library talks. Alice will come along with a hook and say, okay,
right,
you're
that's
off.
how we do it here.
I'm going to go back to tell you a little bit of the story of the Great Bear. There are many different stories, even in the Greek and Roman tradition, and they're also very long, and I'm not going to tell the long version. There's lots of books you can read. So the story about the bear is there was this beautiful young maiden named Callisto, and she was she was being taught by Artemis, who was the goddess of the hunt. Artemis was a bit fussy that the women that worked with her would be maidens. And so anyhow, in these Greek and Roman myths, what normally happens is Zeus gets involved. And Zeus is a very amorous god. And he always, if he sees a young maiden, he wants to have the young maiden. And this is what happened. Poor Callisto was romanced by Zeus, and she became pregnant. Artemis found out and got very cross. And then the story diverges a little bit. The son, Arctos, was born and separated. Artemis became cross and turned Callisto into a bear and wandered the forest. Arctos grew up to be a young man and a hunter, and he encountered his mother in the forest and went to kill her. And Callisto saw that it was her son and came towards him, which was a bad idea if you're a bear and you find a hunter. So unfortunately, Callisto was killed by her son. But Artemis took pity on her and put her up in the sky. And so there she is. And later on, Arctos was put up in the sky to follow her. And the interesting thing about this constellation Boötes is this star here it's called Arcturus. Remember her son was named Arctos? This is the bear watcher. And as Callisto goes around the sky, circumpolar, the bear watcher follows her around the sky. And this is the Greek myth and the Roman myth. Interesting, eh? Remember that. Now, let's go to North America. When Europeans came to North America, they thought they knew it all. And they found these savages who didn't know anything. They were living, they didn't know anything about culture and literature. And there's mostly priests, Jesuit priests. And they said, let us tell you about the stars in the sky. That constellation is Bear. And the Mi'kmaq natives said, yes, we know. How do you know? It's a bear. We know it's a bear. It's always been a bear. So the Europeans came to North America and they were pointing at these stars, and Mi'kmaq said, that is a bear. So they already knew. They had known for a long time that it was a bear. How did that happen? Well, I think the answer is that these myths and legends go back a very long way. Tens of thousands of years. And some of these stories have moved around the world from a common origin, and people have adapted them. And then they meet again in the middle, and they're still bears. But that's where the similarity almost finishes. Because the bear is just this part here. This is the bear, and the name of the bear is Muin. And it's a she-bear. And this is Muin's back here. And there's a story called Muin and the Seven Bird Hunters. I believe there's a book in the library here. Again, it's a very long story. I'm just going to give you the Reader's Digest version, the abbreviated version. I'll introduce the characters and I'll say a little bit about what happens. Here, up here, there's a little circle, almost a circlet of stars that the Romans call Corona Borealis, the northern crown. But this is Muin's den. This is where Muin sleeps in the wintertime. And in the spring, she comes out of her den and starts walking around the sky, around the earth, actually. And for reasons that I don't fully understand, the presence of the bear is not accepted by some of the residents of the forest. And most of those were birds. And so the birds start to chase the bear. The first bird that's on the bear's case is robin. Now, I have the Arabic names of the stars, because most of the stars in the sky, even in the Greek and Roman myths, the star names were provided by the Arabs. And then after that, I have the Mi'kmaq name. And then I have the English name. Now, I don't speak Mi'kmaq. And some of these are very difficult. So if there's anybody out there who knows how to say these words, just shout them out. I'm not looking at anyone in particular.
Jibjawedge.
Sorry?
Jibjawedge.
Jibjawedge is robin. And the next one, I love this one, is chickadee. It's called Mizar in Arabic. Chickadee. I'm going to try this one. Jijigays.
Jigwez.
Jigwez?
Jigwez.
Jigwez.
Yes.
Almost sounds like a chickadee. Chickadees go chickadee. The third one, and you can't see it here in this picture, But there's another little star right next to Chickadee. So that was my star. There's another star we call Alcor. And some people see that as a test of vision. It's a little tiny star. And that doesn't show up in that picture, but it is the birch bark pot that the chickadee carries to cook the meat. I'm not even going to attempt to say this one. It's Grey Jay is the third one. Nope, no takers. So those are the first three. Those are the first three birds. And you remember, if you remember from Kathy's reading, you remember she said there were 3 hunters, and 3 hunters always follow the bear. There's the first 3 hunters. But there's more. Jump over, now we're going to jump over to the constellation we know as brightest. And we're going to take the first star in that constellation. And it's the passenger pigeon, which is sadly extinct now. It used to be quite common, but it was hunted out of existence by guess who? Who hunted the passenger pigeon out of existence? You think the Mi'kmaq did it?
No.
Who?
Europeans.
Right. I heard a story about a lady that lived on Eskasoni Reserve, and she had never been to the big city. Now, for her, the big city was Sydney. And they took her to the big city, and she saw a pigeon, and she said, "Place." Is that how you say that word? Place. She saw the pigeon and said, "Place." So somewhere in her memory, she knew that was something like a passenger pigeon. The blue jay. And then the last two are very nice. They're owls. And this one is Arcturus star, very, very bright star, and it's the barred owl, Ugugues. And the last one is the saw-whet owl. I've never seen one of these, and I don't know what they sound like. I heard their call is very unpleasant, but I'm not sure. Kind of raspy. So these are the 4 bird hunters. And the 4 bird hunters pursue the bear throughout the spring and the summer and into the fall. But what happens is the last 4 get lost. And only the 3, robin, chickadee, and gray jay, are able to keep up. Remember I said those stars were circumpolar, they never set. But those other stars in Botes, they set here. So the story of Moon and the 7 bird hunters reflects the stars in the sky and the astronomy. But in the fall, when Moon rises up on her back, all of the three hunters catch her and cook her, kill her and cook her. And the first one is Robin, and Robin gets what on his chest for killing the bear? Blood. And he wears that blood chest now forever. And he tries to shake it off, and it shakes it off onto the trees, the leaves on the trees, and turns them red in the fall. When they go about cooking it up with chickadee's pot, and they're sitting down for dinner, guess who shows up? Place, passenger pigeon, blue jay, and the 2 owls show up, say, "What's for dinner?" And being as they are, the first 3 said, "Come and join us and share our food. There's more here. There's enough here for everyone, even though you didn't help." Very nice. Then Moon dies, and her spirit leaves the body. And through the winter, she's on her back and goes back into her den. And in the spring, the spirit comes back into the body. She comes out of the den, and the story starts again. This story of the Mi'kmaq, it never ends. It's a circular story. It goes on over and over. And that's the short story. I just told you. This is a much longer story. And I wanted to show you something interesting that Kathy and I discovered. Because Kathy and I are working on a project involving moons and calendars and so on, which we will tell you about another day, hopefully. But we found in New Brunswick there was some people up at the university, at St. Thomas University, which Kathy went to actually, did Aboriginal studies. And they did a little project and they created a Maliseet moon calendar. This was the very first one. And this was the cover of that calendar. And what do you see? Oops. You see, oh dear. You see a bear and 3 hunters. These aren't bird hunters, they're warrior hunters. But this is an example of how if you just go from Nova Scotia to New Brunswick, the story is almost the same, but it's different in a small way. And then you'll see this all the time. The stories change a bit. Okay, I'm going to move on to another. This isn't a constellation, but it's a collection of stars that some people could pick out in the sky. If you go out on a clear night in the winter, you'll be able to pick these out. It's called the Pleiades, also called the Seven Sisters. And if you have sharp-eyed people, can count those. And actually, I was confused about this until quite recently. So the Pleiades are nymphs, sea nymphs, and they are the daughters of Pleione and Atlas, and the parents are here. These are Pleione and Atlas. These aren't the Seven Sisters. The Seven Sisters are these ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Maybe there's another one there. Maybe that got brighter over the years. But this is the Seven Sisters here. But the whole thing is called the Pleiades. They all have names. And there's various stories about those sea nymphs. One of which involves Orion, which we'll get to soon. I was lucky enough to go to New Zealand. And the Pleiades are very important in New Zealand as a means of telling time. When they see the Pleiades rise in the morning, that means it's time for them to plant their sweet potatoes, because the Maori are agricultural, and they plant sweet potatoes. And they use the rising of the Pleiades as a sign to do their agriculture. And I've done a bit of reading. I haven't found anything from the Mi'kmaq Nation, but elsewhere in Canada, there are stories about these stars representing unruly children that get into trouble. But I want to show you something fun, because I don't know if you've ever noticed this. Have you ever noticed that? Anyone tell me what that is?
It's the headlight of a car or a tail.
It's a grill. What kind is it? Subaru. It's a Subaru, yes. Did you ever wonder what that was on the Subaru? It's like just it's just a pattern, right? It's a logo. Well, in Japan, the word Subaru means united. Okay? And that's what they call that collection of stars, Subaru. And once upon a time, not very long ago, there were 6 medium-sized car companies in Japan, and they decided to become one big car company. It's like one ring rules them all, right? They decided to come together and make a big company, and they decided they were joining together, the 6 of them, so they would make a big company, and they would call it Subaru. Okay, so that's a bit of modern folklore for you. This all happened in the last 30 years. So they only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stars representing the 6 companies in Subaru. It's pretty cool, though. And you know what? This is the old version of the grill, which I like because it looks like the star cluster. Then some marketing person came along and said, you have to update that. You have to change it, make it more cool. So I didn't have a picture of that. But if you go and look at a Subaru now, it doesn't look like that. It's much more stylistic. It doesn't bear the same resemblance to the actual star cluster, which I think is sad. I think I'm going to go to a junk yard and try to see if I can find one of those and get one. I don't know how much it's going to cost. It shouldn't cost too much. Now, I was going to say, does anybody recognize this constellation that I put it on the slide so everyone knows it's Orion? But how many have seen that constellation in the winter sky? Yes, it's pretty common. It's one of the most spectacular. After the Big Dipper, this is what most people can recognize. So Orion is a very spectacular constellation, and right about now is a really good time to see that constellation. And as much can be said about Orion. There's another similarly lengthy tale regarding Orion. He's a great hunter, and usually it's Zeus that pursues the maidens, but in this case, Orion was pursuing the Pleiades. I had to put the Pleiades in there to introduce Orion. So Orion took a shine to the Pleiades and was chasing them through the land. And they complained to their dad, and he complained to a higher god, and Orion was dispatched. Somebody sent a scorpion to fight with him, and I think they ended up killing each other. The scorpion is Scorpius, which is a summer constellation, and Orion is a winter constellation, and they're that far apart in the sky. They're opposite. When Orion is rising, Scorpius is setting. When Scorpius is setting, when Scorpius is rising, Orion's setting. So they're chasing each other around the sky continually. But I wanted to point out a couple of things. One of which is the red star Betelgeuse. There's a story about the star husbands in the Mi'kmaq tradition, about two sisters from the Weasel clan who fall in love with star husbands, and they lie at night and they look at the stars and they choose which one they would want to have as their husband, and they fall asleep and they wake up in the sky land, and then they undergo a number of adventures and eventually end up down on the ground. I'm not going to tell the full story, but I believe that the star husband, so that Betelgeuse is one of the star husbands, because the two sisters say, I like the red one, Betelgeuse is red, and the other one likes the yellow one, and there's another very bright star called Sirius in the winter sky. And I believe, and I can't prove this, but I believe that those two stars might be the star husbands in the story, but I need to do some more research on that. But I did come across something the other day, doing a bit of research on the Mi'kmaq language, and I found a reference to these stars here. This is Orion's belt. So from over here you can see, he's got a couple of arms, a couple of legs like most guys. And he's holding up his shield, and he's got this nice belt, and he's got a sword hanging from it here. And I said, Orion is such a distinct constellation. The Mi'kmaq must have had a name for it, but I couldn't find out anything of the sword. But I did find there was reference to this belt of the stars, and the story is that these are three chiefs who are fishing together, and there's some other stars here which are their fishing lines hanging down. And these are actually in the sky. So the story matches. So here are the three chiefs, and here's their fishing lines down here. I only learned this the other day, so it needs to be checked out, but it seems to be well referenced. So that could be another Mi'kmaq star story. Not really a story, but an identification. Okay. So, I said this was going to be about constellations, but now we're going to talk about the moon.
So this story is called Moon Chief, and after I read the story, Dave is going to tell you some of the scientific information that goes with this story. Okay, so long ago in the old times, there was an old man who no longer could go hunting. When he was young, he was a great hunter, and there was always food in his wigwam. Now that he was old and weary and could not hunt, he and his wife were often hungry. One winter, they had very little to eat, and at last, one cold night, like tonight, there was nothing left. Not even an old moccasin that they could chew. The old man knew that they couldn't live much longer. He said to his wife, "Look out the door and see if Moon Chief is out tonight." The old woman crawled to the door and lifted the flap. "Yes, Moon Chief is out," she told her husband. The old man crept outside the wigwam and stood in the deep snow. He looked up at the moon. "My friend, how are you tonight? We in the wigwam are not very well at all. My wife and I have no food. In the old days, you remember, I was a good hunter. I killed the moose and the caribou and chased them through the deep snow. Now I am old and cannot hunt as I used to. Will you help me, Moon Chief? Send a moose here to my door." The old woman heard him talking. She called out to him, "What are you saying out there in the dark?" The old man told her, "I am asking Moon Chief to send a moose to our door." Early the next morning, the old woman went to the door and looked out. Lying in the snow beside the wigwam was a big moose. She called out to the old man, "Wake up! Wake up! Moon Chief has sent us a moose." The old man awoke, took his bow and arrow, and killed the moose caught in the snow that lay against the wigwam. So it was in the old days, if a man asked Moon Chief for the things he needed, believing that Moon Chief would give him what he asked for, to say, "I will try, Moon Chief, see if he won't send a moose," will not do. If you feel that you are bound to get what you ask for, will Moon Chief send you whatever you need.
So, when Kathy and I were studying the moons, the Mi'kmaq moons of the year, we noticed that all of the moons, the Mi'kmaq names for the moons, had something to do with what was going on in nature. We don't have time to tell you all about that today. But for instance, one moon was called the frog croaking moon, or the peeping moon. And that is the moon which shows up in the spring when the frogs are peeping, tree frogs. Another one is called the maple moon, or the maple sugar moon, which comes when the sap is running. Another moon is a time when the berries are ripe for picking. And we were going through the list. There was a river freezing moon, and there was a tame animals moon. And I said, I don't understand this one that comes around December time. They call it Kesiguikus, or they call it winter moon or chief moon. I don't understand why they call it chief moon, because all the other things have to do with something going on in nature, but that was just chief moon. Like, why is it at that time of year? Don't understand it. It's an anomaly. And I'm a scientist, and I don't like anomalies. I understand everything. I don't understand that one. Why is that one the chief moon? And I have the same book that Kathy has. So I was reading it. I said, maybe I'll learn something from reading these old stories. And I was reading this. And I read it, and I read it again. And then it finally dawned on me. Wait a second. Chief Moon. What was going on? What was going on in the story of the Chief Moon? You have an idea? Pardon me?
The moon was giving them what they wanted.
Yes, but what was going on in nature, in the story? It was winter. And how deep was the snow? Deep. And they were hungry because all their food had run out. So it kind of dawned on me is, yeah, chief moon is at this time of year because chief moon, the man goes out and appeals to moon chief to bring him a moose. And if you hunt a moose, you know that when the snow is deep, it's easier to hunt a moose because they can't move very fast. So it kind of hit me. That's why chief moon is at that time of the year. But I wasn't quite satisfied. I said, there's something I'm missing here. Why is it the chief moon? I mean, I see the connection with the story. And then I started looking on my astronomy software. And this is what I found out. The chief moon time is on or near the winter solstice. And here's an example from a few years ago when there was a full moon right on the solstice, which is the shortest day of the year. And here's the moon way up in the sky above Orion, way up in the sky. Here are the three chiefs fishing down here, and up here is a moon. Here's this great, other people see this great hunter, this very brilliant constellation, and the moon's up here. Now, there's something interesting about the full moon. The full moon does the opposite of what the sun does. In the middle of the winter, the sun's low in the sky, and it spends very little time between rising and setting, and it's very low. The full moon is always opposite the sun. In the middle of winter, on this solstice, the moon is high in the sky. The sun is low in the sky in the day, and the moon is high in the sky at night. And it spends a long time in the sky from sunset to sunrise, because it's a very long night. So it spends a long time up in the sky, and it's very high. And I thought, what better name for the moon in the middle of winter than chief moon? It's the highest, it's in the sky the longest, it's the greatest moon of all, of the whole year. So it's this one here, it's in the sky for 16 hours. It rises, it's in the sky for 16 hours. And it's 63 degrees up. That's about 2/3 of the way up in the sky. Very high up. And just to show you what such a big difference it is, let's go and look what happens in the summertime, near the summer solstice. Where's the moon? The moon up here, high up in the sky? No, it's way down here. Here's the summer. In the summertime, the sun's high in the sky and spends a long time in the sky. The full moon is low in the sky and it spends a short time in the sky. It's way down here. It's only in the sky for 10 hours. And it only gets up about 26 degrees. That's like something like about that. That's not very high at all. I don't know if you've ever noticed in the summertime, the full moon doesn't get very high up in the sky. But in the wintertime, it's always high in the sky. So chief moon, I think, is based on this observation that at that time of the year, the full moon is high in the sky and stays up a long time. That's my story. I'm sticking to that. So thank you, Kathy, for that story. So, I could go on, and I know you don't want me to, but I just thought I would give you a flavor of the different kinds of patterns you can see in the sky and how different people, different cultures look at them. The Europeans and the native people of North America, how they see the same stars and how sometimes see different characters, sometimes very similar characters, but sometimes also very different characters. And really that's what I brought you here to say, is all around the world we see the same stars and we see different patterns and we tell different stories. But the stars belong to everyone, and but we can be different. He wants to know if I think maybe what he's asking, I just talked about 2 moons of the year, but he wanted to know if there were 12, or if there were more.
There are 13 moons in the Mi'kmaq calendar, as we would have now. But there are, in fact, 13 moons, and they have 13 names. I don't know if that kind of goes into a whole different program. I could, we could talk. there's 13, not 12, but only 13 when you have 13 moons in a year,
Yeah.
right? So you'd have to add a 13 moon in when you have the 13 full moons. Because some months, some years, we have 2 full moons in a month. So
So
at that time, we would have 13 moons. They each have different names. The moon times have different names, and they all have something to do with what's going on in nature. So, for instance, now I'm going to go on. For instance, the moon that we have this moon time, the February moon, is called the snow blinding moon time. So, I'll tell a little story. So, last February, around this time, I was driving home from work, and Dave and I had just gotten really heavy into this project, and we were learning about the moon times, and I was seeing it come to life. So for a year now, I've been seeing each moon time. I've been connecting that moon time with what's going on in nature. And so I called Dave, or he called me. I was driving, so I'm hoping he called me on Bluetooth. Yes. And I said, Dave, I can't see a thing. I can't find my sunglasses. I'm completely blinded. The snow, the sun, the glare, I can't see anything. And Dave says to me, well, you know what moon time we're in, what period? And I'm like, the snow blinding moon. I'm like, the snow blinding moon time. And that was the first time that I had made the connection. And the next one, for me, I'm really excited about the next moon time, because when we go into March, we're going into maple moon time. And that's my favorite time of year. That's when we would collect maple sap, and so on and so on. So each of them have their own names, all something to do with nature, except the 13th, which could be called, perhaps, the Great Moon. And I like to think it was called the Great Moon because you can put it wherever. It doesn't have a reference to nature, so you can put it wherever you would need to make things flow again, so that you don't have frogs croaking in the snow blinding time.
Yeah.
That might be way, way off, but you need everything to work because the Mi'kmaq depended on that. They depended on each full moon, each new moon, to know what they could expect, to know what food source. Last month, we had spawn of tomcod moon, and that was the time where my people would fish the tomcod. So they had to pay attention to the different cycles to know what they were going to expect. The fat tame animal moon in October.
Well, there's quite a few books that have been published on Mi'kmaq culture, but it's like sometimes it's a little bit like searching for a needle in a haystack, because you would get a book out and there would only be one little story or some little section. So you have to kind of read them all and look and kind of scan them for things that might have something to do with the sky. And I almost missed the Moon Chief story, because when I first read it, I just like, I don't understand that, but give me something else. And it took me a couple times of reading it that I realized that there might be a connection.